Thanks everyone for jumping on. It looks like we've got a good bit of people who are still joining from the waiting room. So I'm going to give it about one more minute and then we're going to get started with today's presentation. All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Kenzie Vazzari, ACCA Strategic Partnerships Manager. Today's webinar is presented by one of our Platinum Strategic Partners, Wrightsoft. And we're excited to have Jean Palandro from Mytech, who is their Senior Inside Sales Rep, here with us today. During this session, Jean is going to walk us through how to get HVAC load calculations and specs right using Manual J, ensuring your customers experience top-notch efficiency and comfort with properly sized and installed equipment. But before we dive in, just a couple of quick reminders. One, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand through ACCA's online resource library after today. Also, feel free to drop any questions or comments in the Q&A chat throughout the presentation. We're going to go through those at the end. All right, well, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce or pass the mic over to Gene and let him get started today. Gene, the floor
Okay.
is yours.
Thank you, Kenzie. Well, welcome. My name is Gene, and I'm going to talk to you about manual J load calculations. Specifically, we're going to talk about working smarter, not harder. Why ACCA's Manual J takes the guesswork out of HVAC design and installation. All right, so I am Gene, and I'm not here to sell you any product, only an idea. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a potential customer who has a need for an HVAC replacement or a newly installed heating and cooling system, and they have come to you for help. So let's talk about that box that sits out in the backyard. Mine's over here, or maybe on a porch, roof, attic, basement. Who determined what size that box is or should be? How much should it cost? And more importantly, how was it determined? Rule of thumb, square footage equals CFM, or maybe simply looking at the back of the boilerplate of that failed unit, seeing what tonnage it is, and then replacing it as such. Okay. Whew. I've heard and seen it all, including this load sizing comedic gem. And here's an example here. Okay. The rules of this manual is to stand in front of the building, hold it in front of the house, and if the house fit that box, it's 2 ton, that box, it's 3 ton, that box, it's 5 ton. Notice, not Manual J, okay? So that's what we call rule of thumb, and it's not a great rule, and I don't like to follow it, okay? That said, so the answer to the question of who or what, of course, should be us. And by using ACCA's Manual J 8th edition to determine the load for the house and the equipment needed to condition in it. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Jones have spent very little time thinking about the box, but they do know they needed to make it work in order to be comfortable, and they hope you can make it meet their budget. Well, for decades now, the smart people at the ACCA, the Air Conditioning Contractors of America, which we are all members and like to promote, they've been producing a handbook to get the equipment size of that box right. Okay, journalism voice. Manual J 8th edition is a nationally recognized standard for calculating HVAC equipment sizing loads for single-family detached homes, small multi-unit structures, condominiums, townhouses, and manufacturer homes. Hello, Mytech. A proper load calculation performed in accordance with the Manual J 8th edition procedure is required by national building codes and most state and local jurisdictions and plans examiners. And if it's not, it will be soon. You don't want to get a call or talk to a Mr. Plans examiners without a Manual J load calculation. And it should be. Don't guess. Measure twice, cut once. one of my many keywords you'll hear throughout this discussion. All right, so let's end the journalism voice. So I'm here to ask you to be the help. An eye doctor doesn't come out to your house when you can't see and just sell you a pair of glasses and hope it was the right prescription, right? And if it's not right, he has to come back out at his cost to fix the problem. And if still guessing, may take multiple trips and hope to get it right. That's hard. That's not smart. Same for the HVAC professional. Don't guess. Manual J calculates the heat loss, heat gain, and moisture control of a building based on the construction types, the quality and age and size of the components of that building, the amount of occupants in that building at any given time, and the physical location and orientation of that building envelope. The direction of the sun throughout the day and throughout the year is factored into this equation, along with longitude, latitude, altitude, and where that building is located. So I'm here to provide a low-level discussion on why ACCA's Manual J takes the guesswork out of HVAC design and installation. For more information, go to acca.org, and you can look up the technical manuals, including the Manual J booklet shown here. You can also get manuals on duct sizing for Manual D, equipment sizing for Manual S, registers for Manual T, and so forth, including zoning and all other factors for HVAC design and installation. Strongly urge to take advantage of the tools and resources provided by our ACCA brothers and sisters. Okay, so if you're looking for theories, explanations, or training, then do a Google on home performance rock stars like Alex Meany and the Corbett Lunsford, or talk to Wes Davis's ACCA All-Stars about their design resources and training opportunities. They're cool. Take advantage of them, okay? My role is to stress the importance and show you how easy it is to be the help, especially if you take advantage of the ACCA approved Manual J software solutions on the market to get things right, okay? Now back to our potential customer, okay? Instead of focusing on simply replacing the appliance, by owning the building and using the software to assist, you can not only provide an accurate building analysis and equipment replacement or installation needs, but you can also offer options on efficiency, accessories, comfort, and price in order to elevate the overall comfort experience for your customer. And by not oversizing or guessing, you can help make it affordable and avoid those costly callbacks, complaints, pain, and trips to adjust for poorly measured and sized equipment. Measure twice, cut once, smart people tell me, and you can achieve your goal as well as meet the needs of your customers. So this means more referrals for quality work and service, which means more hot lead opportunities to help you grow your business. Smart, right? You do good work for Mr. and Mrs. Jones, they tell their sister and cousins and friends. Guess what? Who are they calling? They're calling you because you're smart, right? All right, so how do we accomplish this? It starts by knowing the equipment that you sell and install. Another of my popular key phrases, okay? Know your equipment. Doctors don't offer medication without knowing how it performs in the body. The same applies to our industry. Okay, so ACCA legends like Warren Lubson and the late great Jack Rise always stressed to me that you must understand your equipment in order to know how it performs in the home. And then you can educate the customer so they better understand their options on efficiency, comfort, and how that relates to price. By the way, acca.org has tools that can assist you with that and much more. Again, be the help. So let's go ahead and identify some low-level things to consider when evaluating a building envelope and determining the load requirements, and how ACCA-approved design principles in the software and the manual allow you to work smarter, not harder. Or go ahead and purchase the Manual J handbook here at acci.org. I've provided a link here. All right, here's a tip. Get the software and maybe even the book, and you'll be working smarter, because the handbook and its math alone will make you work harder, I promise. Okay, there are things in math that you have to do to accomplish your task. Software takes the pain out of that task. All right, speaking of the ACCA, I'm reminded that when I wore a younger man's clothes, I was fortunate enough to shake the hand of the man who offered the most recent versions of the Manual J 7th and 8th editions. His name was Hank Rakowski. And I was hired many years ago by the man who authored the original software version of those same Manual J 7th and 8th editions, the great Bill Wright. I really would like to see some monuments created to salute these great men someplace, sometime, and somewhere, but that's something that I can't control. Okay. Now, Hank's a scientist and an expert at identifying and diagnosing a building envelope. The number one priority on his list is a proper building site inspection. Okay. You have to see, feel, and review that structure in order to assess the building needs properly. Please don't get me started on cloud-based programs that use satellite imagery and or Google Maps to complete a so-called load calculation. You and I can't be friends if you rely solely on this tactic, believe me. And full disclosure, I represent a broker that has this type of imagery tool as a feature. But Hank and Bill and many others would kick me to the curb if I didn't strongly recommend a site inspection on all projects, big or small. So included here is a simple document that I provide and created long ago to help compile data in the field. Okay, you can get down your construction types of the window, wall, door, ceiling, roof, and floor. Okay, any orientation or customer information, construction types and quality. You can even make a little rough sketch here and then take that to the manual or your computer and then go in and input the information and get your answer quickly, efficiently and accurately. Okay, so sorry to reminisce about my heroes. Let's get back to not guessing. Okay, let's consider some Manual J variables that need to be considered before we can even begin. All right, summer and winter indoor and outdoor design specifications, specifically system characteristics, ventilation, can easily and smartly be managed with the software tools. Here's an example. We can show the indoor conditions, system characteristics, and ventilation. If I bring up a software program that I'm familiar with, then I can actually go in and look at some of these capabilities here. So if I go into, let's see, we'll go into zone information. I can see here where those indoor conditions come into play and can be set and managed. I can see here where the system characteristics can be set and managed and added to if we want to talk about humidification. That's another story for the smart people and the all-stars to talk about. We'll leave that to them. We can deal with ventilation types and hot water piping and any other variable that comes into play when we choose our weather area and describe the building envelope. And that includes the ventilation concerns here as well. Okay, so if we need to add extra air and manage that, we can do so within the software as well as the manual. Obviously, software makes things better because you don't have to guess as much. It's just right there to make choices instead of knowing where to go and how to do it in the manual. Okay, so having said that, so Hank would say, as a scientist, momentum equals mass times velocity. All right, select the equipment to meet the load sufficiently, but never oversize. There's no such thing as a fudge factor using Manual J or specifically the software. The goal being to move air and balance moisture based on the heat loss, heat gain of that building. Manual J determines that and more. So let's move on to the next factor, infiltration. This is basically is determining losses in that building. And both the manual and software programs, hopefully yours is included, uses three methods: simplified, advanced, and you can also use blower door testing capabilities and information to assist you here as well. So again, using a software program I'm familiar with, we can deal with a simplified method for infiltration. Okay, we can deal with a more detailed method of infiltration for the entire home if we want to or need to, by going in depth and diving into the building envelope here. A step further is the blower door method. So if you do blower door testing and offer that for your customers, you're doing a great service for you and their needs in as far as the accuracy of that loss in that building. Okay, the atmospheric conditions and the losses through construction types, windows, fireplaces, and things like that. Okay, and again, within the software, we have the ability to go in and look at the infiltration and deal with those variables specifically. Okay, so one of the things it asks you is the construction quality of the building. Okay, is it average, semi-tight, tight, semi-loose, or loose? Okay, who determines that? Well, if you can walk up to the window and it's a very old building and it's got a single pane window with, say, metal glass, and you put your hand up and you can feel a draft, guess what? That's not average, and that's certainly not tight. So we're talking in the semi-loose or loose variety here, okay? Now, if we're not sure exactly what loose versus average versus semi-tight means, well then, we can consult the ACCA software manual, obviously, but there's also another way to go about that. And we can click help within our ACCA approved software programs, and I can actually click on what is it? And when I do so, it brings up a little screen here that provides information and videos even on what the difference is between average, tight, and any other variable here is. So if I move this out of the way, you can see here that using Manual Day 8th edition calculation method, here's a definition for tight, semi-tight, average, semi-loose, loose, etc. Okay, and here's some general notes to consider. And again, this is all built into the Manual J software. Okay, we even have factors that go back to the Manual J 7th edition that Hank authored way back in 70s, 80s-ish to get that information and go from there. Okay, so within the program are resources similar to the manual itself handbook, where you can resource variables and information to help you make the right choice. Okay. Another thing here, variable we consider is the number of stories on the building. Obviously, if you have a second floor on top of a first floor, you have two conditioned spaces. So the only space that deals with a non-conditioned area is the second floor with that ceiling and roof. Same thing with the bottom floor. The only conditioned space would be the bottom below that. Same thing with the sides for each story. So you want to tell it how many stories are on that building, so it can factor in the conditioned spaces and so forth, as well as exposures. Okay, single family home will at least have 3, if not 4 exposures. Okay, but a townhome or a condo or something like that may only have 1 or 2 exposures because they have a building either in front of or back of or behind them or on each side. Okay, we want to factor in losses here. That's what infiltration is. So if you have fireplaces in your home, then you're going to have some losses we have to factor in. Okay, so we want to know obviously the number of fireplaces, but also the fireplace quality. And again, we have semi-tight, average, and semi-loose variables to describe that. So if you have an old brick or stone fireplace that is not covered and has no glass and just kind of a veil screen in front of it, there's going to be a lot of loss there. You're going to lose heat and or cooling up through that chimney structure. Okay, but if you have a very tight modern, or even those fireplaces that aren't really fireplaces, they're just kind of fire centers, if you will, and all buttoned up and tight and sealed and so forth, then your fireplace quality can be, determined on the semi-tight or tighter side. And again, if you have questions, we always can go to help, click what is it, and we'll get a definition of exactly that factor we're looking for. Okay, so having said that, we've dealt with infiltration. Another important factor to deal with is the duct loss and gain percentage. Okay, duct loss and gain percentage. Equipment performance can be directly influenced by where the ducts that supply the air to the rooms are installed and located. My friend and HVAC superstar Alex Meany stresses that the location of the ducts, not to mention the quality and efficacy of their installation, has a measured influence on performance. Ducts that are well sealed and located in conditioned spaces perform substantially better than those that are located in a hot or cold attics, basement, or even a crawl space, given the influence temperature has on the moving air and its avenue for delivery, specifically the ducts. Again, a familiar example is included here, the software example that I'm familiar with. So you can actually see here and locate and tell the program or the manual where those ducts are located. And you could do it for both supply and return. If I bring up the software program, once again, I can go into load calculations and click up load preferences, and I can go over here and deal with the duct loss and gain. Okay, so if I pull up the software, then I could tell it where the ducts are located. Ideally, if they're in conditioned spaces, it makes things a whole lot easier. So we can, if not, we can make our choice based on the true distribution preference in this building. Okay, and you can see the various choices we have available for you here. Okay, and the variables that come with making your specific choices. So you can see here, we can even deal with the configurations of the duct. So if you're using a trunk and branch or using radial flex system, okay, you can even tell it where the outlets are located, where those registers are located in the building or in the room. Okay, sealing, we can tell it whether it's very sealed very well. Okay, in other words, it's all the ducts. You've heard of duct tape. Well, duct tape is a sealing added along with other insulation factors that can mask the 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 holes and the ridges in a duct distribution system to eliminate any losses of air through that system, but also to eliminate any outdoor factors on that duct, such as temperature. Okay, so where those ducts are located are important, and we can even tell it the insulation value, if you will, of that masking component. Okay, and down here you see a little bit of the results and factors for our choices that we make. So that said, other factors to consider before the load is zoning. Okay, the goal of zoning is to accommodate different solar loads or other control schedules. For example, many projects will be zoned as east versus west to handle the different peak loads for each orientation, east versus west. Or some pros zone for bedrooms versus the rest of the house, some for upstairs versus downstairs, etc. Okay, design software helps you smartly offer zoning options for that building to meet the needs of the building envelope and your customer. So offering zoning can give you comfort advantages to not only you, the building, but also your customer as far as the comfort needs are concerned and performance. Okay, and that brings me now to the windows, and that's the glass, not the operating system. Okay, according to the esteemed Mr. Meany, the window type, quality, and orientation of the sun greatly contributes to the amount of heat, to the amount of heat loss and heat gain for any, especially westward facing exposures, and must be accounted for in order to condition the space properly. Various variables such as overhangs, shading, bug screens, and surface area will have an influence, and using the software tools to work smarter, one can easily factor for those and adjust the load requirements properly. Manual J factors in the direction of the sun on that building throughout the day and then out throughout the year and its effect on the building load requirements. Okay, here's another familiar software example which includes the ability to factor in the number of occupants in the building. So I can pull up the program, any program, and in this example, I can pull up default scenarios for the windows in that building. Okay, so going to the software itself, can hit cancel here. I can go into window details and set up defaults for this window before I even begin. Okay, and this will be for the predominant window type. We can make changes for any other window that is different from the standard default in the program as we go or in the manual as we fly. Okay, so you can see here, we could tell it where there's any special, if there's a storm door or I'm sorry, a storm window during the cooling season, any internal shading, okay, this certainly will have an effect on blocking the sun and its exposure and heat. Okay, so factor those in if they're there. Okay, insect screen, they actually have a little bit of a reflection. So if they're there, factor them in. And you can see here also overhangs. So that direction on the sun throughout the day and throughout the year, at some point there may be an overhang or something else impeding the sun on that building. So you can go ahead and factor that in, including the foreground. When the sun beats down on the ground and hits off either concrete or green grass or even crushed rock, tar, or gravel, that will have a solar effect on the temperature in that room. So we need to accommodate for that. And we can use the manual or the software to take care of that for us accordingly. Okay. So let's go back. And now we can move on. All right, having completed our site inspection, then we've determined our design strategy and we made our inputs for describing the building envelope. We can now use the software or the handbook to calculate the manual J load and we review the results with our customer. Okay, to do this, we'll choose the construction types of the window, wall, door, ceiling, and floor. And we choose those directly from the ACCA tables. We're not making them up. Okay, and you're not trying to write them down or guess them. They're right from the handbook, so we make choices in the manual or in the software. Okay, and this includes the HTML, which is the heat transfer multiplier identifiers, the U and the R values of the construction types in the windows. Then we set the orientation to tell it which way north is facing on that building. Then we use the design tools or the manual to help envision the building, draw it out, and record the internal properties for people, appliances, lighting, machinery, etc. Okay, and here are some software example of the design and review process. So you can see here a familiar example of an ACCA. This is the Wrightsoft Manual J software. And this is also the worksheet equivalent where it takes into account and records all of the information for that building envelope. Okay, so when we go to the software itself and we go to the program here, you can see once we've set up our design parameters and our defaults for people, appliances, lighting, machinery, people, ventilation, and so forth, and we've set that orientation, like I mentioned earlier, we can go in and actually choose the construction types for those building components in that building. So we can tell it what type of window it is, okay, what material it is, whether it has any material that will deflect or reflect sun and heat for that window, okay? And you see over here, it'll factor in the sensible heat gain ratio, okay? The U value of that window. It'll give us the heat transfer multiplier, any other information, give you a little description so we can make our choice accordingly and move on and set the windows for the building. Same thing for the wall. I click on the wall tab here and I could tell it the type of wall material in this building. Okay, so whether it's frame, masonry, even a log home, whether it's manufactured home, and I'll have a bit on that later as far as the manufactured and offsite building phenomenon, if you will. That's just a hint, more on that later. But here's where you could tell it what type of wall, what type of insulation, either on the outside or inside, the actually wall material, the board material, what type of framing, the sticks in that wall, okay? Importantly, the cavity insulation, okay? The interior finish, so the internal wall that's either wallpapered or painted or stuccoed or what have you, and any maybe interior board insulation as well. So when we make our choices here, you can see again, it starts the heat transfer multiplier and factors all in the U value and the manual J codes, gives us a little description here. And now we have our wall construction set. We do the same for the properties in the door. So given that there may be more than one door in the building, we can make a choice for the first one, the front one, if you will, first, and then make any changes throughout the building as we move on throughout the design process. Okay, same thing for the ceiling, whether you're using the handbook or whether you're using a software program to emulate that and make things easier and working smarter, if you will, you can make your choices for the ceiling. You can tell it whether it's a ceiling under an attic, a flat roof or ceiling, slope roof or ceiling. We tell it what type of roof material, whether it's asphalt, shingles, wood shingles, tile, slate, whatever it may be. Any insulation involved in that ceiling, okay? Whether it's vented, unvented, encapsulated. We see these new encapsulated attic scenarios where the attic is actually a conditioned space and has to be factored in accordingly. And we also have things like, radiant barriers to deflect the heat and the solar gains from the sun on that building up in the ceiling and up in the attic, and the wall material and ceiling material as well, and the insulation for each. And you can see new insulation techniques and values have been factored into the software as well as the manual as well to take into account new technologies. Okay. And lastly, we could deal with the bottom floor. And again, in Manual J, the conditioned spaces on the ceiling and the floor are the important things. Factors that take into account the ceiling and the floor only come into play on the top floor and the bottom floor respectively. So if we're on or below grade, like many of the houses in the south and the west are built, we can tell it that. If we live up in the north, you may have basement scenarios that come into play. Down south, I'm told that basements are really just swimming pools. So if you are doing a basement in the south, you must consider it a swimming pool. That's an attempt at humor that never works. So that will be my last one. Okay. So having said all that, we could tell it the construction types for the bottom floor, and that includes if it is a basement or a slab, and take care of any insulation or other variables to factor that load. Okay. So now we have our construction site set, the orientation set of that building. We know when we walk out the front door that we're facing south. Okay. So then this building now, if you can look at it, windows are more located on the east wall than they are on the west. And particularly on this west wall, I'm going to go ahead and drop in a, what do we need here? We're going to drop a room over here to represent the garage. Okay, so it's just a matter of going over and telling it, I've got a 21 by 18 garage here. That's a dormer, so I don't want to do that. So if I want to, I can go ahead and drop a door here to represent the garage, or any other changes I can make in here. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off the ducts while I'm at it. Okay, and the notation. All right, so what here is we've got a building layout. So it's a simple matter of just going over to the program, clicking on a room, and laying out that room right next to the one that we have here. And given that I mentioned this is a garage and not a conditioned space, I'm going to pull up the properties of that room, and I'm going to actually call it a garage. But more importantly, because I'm not conditioning this space, do I want to include it in calculations? I'm going to click no. So now the program knows, okay, that the rest of this building will be conditioned, but this space, the garage, will not. And if I turn on the ducts, you could see here that the program recognizes that this is not a conditioned space and will not provide air to it accordingly. But it will recognize this room being next to the garage, which is unconditioned. So this wall here will be recognized by the program as knowing that it's next to not outside factors, but a conditioned space. And we'll put that into the equation accordingly. Okay. So that's cool to know there. But that's about as easy as it gets as far as the design criteria. If you can move your mouse from one side of the screen to the other, you're almost overqualified. Okay, so it's easy to drag and drop rooms and windows and doors onto the floor plan like so. Okay, and if you see, if I go ahead and drag and drop a window onto this bathroom here on the north wall, it automatically changed the equation, automatically changed the manual J load, factored in more air. It went from, I believe, 85 to 95 CFMs for this bathroom here. And if it needed to, it would resize the duct to make sure the last run here gets the proper amount of air. You could see ACCA's manual D in this example does automatic trunk reduction if you tell it to. So you can see as we have our indoor unit here supplying the air, as it comes down the pipe here at 12 inches, just about here, ACCA's manual D would determine we need to reduce that supply run trunk to make sure that the last supply run gets the proper amount of air. So it reduces from 12 to 9 in this example, and then the supply room at 7, make sure that it gets this bathroom with that added window we just put in there, gets the proper amount of air for to make it comfortable. Okay, so that's how Manual J works. That's how we can actually go in and then determine via the worksheet and other design criteria the load we need and the equipment we need to meet that load. Okay, so let's go ahead. And once we now, as I mentioned here, once you have the load, you can calculate your manual S equipment options, make choices for that, including efficiency options. You can go ahead and do the manual D duct layout and design criteria like I showed, a parts takeoff, job cost estimate even, complete with bill of materials, and also accessory options for your customer. Okay, all included in many of the software programs. Take advantage of those resources. Okay, so if you haven't already noticed, I'm an emotional guy and I have a passion for this industry and its people. My dad sold air conditioning out of department stores in New York and New England back in the 70s and 80s, really. And he set the model and actually record sales numbers for appliances back in the day. You can Google J.M. Fields or Leachmere sales in New York and New England, respectively, for reference. Okay, if remember back in 1978, if you're old enough, the blizzard of 78 hit New England and New York and crippled the area. Well, just months later that summer, a heat wave came through and equally crippled the area, but with heating and high humidity. So that summer, my dad in Leachmere sales sold every single unit in their power, in their buying with, and ran out of air conditioning units for all of New England. Okay, $1 million in 1 week sales figures from selling air conditioners. And back then, he wasn't using Manual J. He was using the slide rule that was put together by, I believe it was GE, that helped them determine the proper space to determine the proper window unit to cool that space. Okay, that's back in the 70s and 80s. Okay, so given that, I'm inspired and motivated to educate the current and especially the future HVAC professionals on how using Manual J and specifically ACCA approved Manual J software will allow you to work smarter, not harder. Okay, and you can offer the best practices that you can advertise and market. Okay, I want to help One Truck Chuck. Okay, that's the HVAC contractor or professional that has one truck servicing his area. Okay, whether it's installation, service, tech calls, what have you. I want One Truck Chuck to become 5 Truck Chuck or 10 or 20 Truck Chuck. And using Manual J and being the help will assist in making that happen. Okay, as you can tell, I'm clearly not an expert, but I've met and learned from some of the smartest pros on the planet. Okay, I've mentioned some of them earlier, but I'd like to acknowledge some others that I haven't mentioned, and that includes John Perkle from New Age Dimension in Florida, Eric and Ricky Grenell from Lakes Region HVAC in New Hampshire, the hot water and cold beer king, Steve Wheels Wheelan, okay, in the PA area, along with HVAC professors Rob Ham and Tom Hunt in Kentucky and Arkansas, respectively. These guys do it right. They work smarter, not harder. They use Manual J to accomplish their goals and assist their customers, and they do it as professionally as anyone can see. And pros like Rob Ham and Tom Hunt have, for years and years and years, as colleagues of mine, taught me and assisted me as I've taught them and assisted them in showing future HVA students the right way, if you will. Okay, best practices, be the help. I also want to say hey and thanks to the outstanding teams at MyTech Wrightsoft that I work for and with. Okay, hello, Jane, Jonathan, Michael, Kramer, Eric, Chloe, Don, David, Matt, Hamilton. You guys rock. None of this can be accomplished without you. Okay. And lastly, I'd like to thank the great team at ACCA, Bart, Wes, Christine, and especially the hardworking marketing team. Thank you, Kenzie and Michaela. I value our decades-long partnership, and I want to pass my knowledge and passion onto anyone willing to give me an opportunity to listen. Come visit me at the ACCA Expo in Austin, Texas in April. You can see here's a link. Go to the website acca.org, and you'll see it'll pop up as a option for you. Actually, let me show you that option. And right here, you don't want to miss this conference, not just to see me. I've got the biggest booth and the loudest mouth, but you're going to learn a lot from people a lot smarter than my capabilities and my brain. And this is a really good event and something where we can all bring it together and learn, discuss, and have a good time as well. Okay, so basically my idea is to show you firsthand how ACCA approved Manual J software can have you working smarter, not harder, and also will help you and your customer satisfy any HVAC comfort need, achieve an HVAC comfort goal, or solve an HVAC comfort problem. I appreciate the opportunity. Let's be awesome, and I'll see you in Austin. Kenzie, I'm done.
Thanks, Jean. I appreciate it. It doesn't look like there were any questions submitted from the group for the Q&A, but it does look like a few people had a comment about duct tape. Vincent said he doesn't use duct tape since it usually delaminates over time, but the right mastic tape or black tape with the right UL approvals is appropriate. And then David also commented saying that cloth duct tape is not UL 181 approved, but is a generic term of duct tape. As long as it is UL 181 approved and or duct mastic will seal the duct for leakage. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Exactly right. I use the duct tape almost tongue in cheek. We want to talk about mastic and the proper materials that we have in our tool belt to utilize. Duct tape is for the homeowner who wants to fill up a hole or seal a gap, and that's not the professional way. That's not working smarter and not working. That's working harder. So the proper mastic, as he mentioned to his point, is the way you want to go. And ACCA resources, tools, and people can identify the solution for you in that respect. Good point, Dave.
And that looks like all that came in. But again, I do want to just say thank you, Jean, for your time and your expertise today. And thanks to everyone for joining us. If you found today's webinar insightful and want to connect with Jean and the MyTech team in person, like Jean mentioned, you'll have the perfect opportunity to do so at our upcoming conference in Texas next month, where they're going to be exhibiting. So make sure to stop by their booth. And if you haven't registered yet, or if you haven't attended an ACCA conference in the past, this is your year to do it. We're taking things bigger and better in true Texas fashion. We have some incredible educational sessions for you, along with top tier keynote speakers, live country music, and even a mechanical bull. So that should be a lot of fun. But make sure to go to our website. You can register there. I promise you don't want to miss it. And finally, if you want to rewatch today's webinar, you can find that on demand through our member resource library online. And again, thanks to everyone who joined the session today, and can't wait to see you all in Texas next month. Take care, everyone. Thanks,
Thank
Jean.
you. Bye-bye. Thank you, Kenzie. Thank you all.